Gratitude obviously is a humbling capacity. You learn to become more appreciative.
We can look at layers of gratitude. How can we look at a situation, for example, that we may be experiencing that may be challenging?
But I think they all springboards or a surplus capacity that we all have and just don't use.
So whatever the situation is, are we able to have gratitude for ourselves?
Change is necessary in all our lives. If you welcome change, you can move forward. If you don't welcome change, you will get stuck.
Shift your attention towards something that you are grateful for. You begin looking at life with such a different lens, and the things that were important before became almost irrelevant.
Welcome back to the Sparks of Gratitude podcast. I am your host, Randy Sparks, and you know that gratitude can change lives, but even more so, I believe that gratitude saves lives. And today we're bringing two extremely interesting people to the conversation, Dr. Andreea Vanacker and Christophe Fauconnier. Did I say your names correctly? Okay, I don't speak French or Romanian or Afrikaans, but I do speak Spanish, which doesn't help me at all with either of your names. So, but Christophe and Andrea are co-authors of this wonderful book called The Human Growth Code, which talks about prospering in a rapidly changing and complex world, primarily focusing on tapping into our human capacity for growth and how we can make that a fulfilling and prospering experience. Have I described that correctly? Well, there's going to be endless questions that I could have talking about your book, but each of you also have so many meaningful things that you are working on and have founded independently. Andrea is an author, speaker, brain tumor survivor, and the founder of something that's called 1 Million Years of Joy. And if anybody listening wonders if that sparks curiosity in you, please Google that right now, and you'll be able to learn what work she's doing, and that's going to come up. And then as well, Christophe, I love how you describe yourself as a welcome change practitioner. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about what that means to you and then how that connects with the book that you're writing. So maybe let's start there. Christophe, what does it mean to be a welcome change practitioner?
It means that change is necessary in all our lives. So we can't not embrace change or undergo change. But learning to do that with a welcoming attitude will just generate so much more joy, will allow you to grow so much more, and don't get stuck in, if you welcome change, you can move forward. If you don't welcome change, you will get stuck. And stuck makes you stuck not only where you are, but stuck in fear, stuck in negative emotion, stuck in being against your nature.
Okay, well, I love that. And you have a background in psychology, among other things, and you've founded a company called Innate Motion, which its purpose is to help people embrace that positivity and positive attitude towards making change.
We call ourselves the business humanizing company. And what we want, our core belief, and that's also a core belief for Andrea and myself, is that when people thrive, business can thrive. And if you align the human agenda with the business agenda, both will prosper. And, both human agenda and business agenda require change, constant change, meaning it's always happening. It's only when we start putting some institutions or our own frameworks in place that stop us from doing that, get stuck in a place where we should always be in flow, that we start making fear choices rather than growth choices. And I would say the book was also written to disarm the brain, our identities, our culture, to make more growth choices rather than fear choices.
Oh, I love the mindset, growth over fear. I've been having a lot of conversations with people lately about fear and my relationship with fear. and what that means, and when that surfaces in my life, and how do I back up and observe it, and how do I feel about it, and do I make peace with it, and I've realized that if I make peace with it, then I'm not halted, and then I can grow. And so I'd love to hear either of your thoughts on that. You mentioned something at the beginning of the book. I mean, this is such a great book. I mean, look this up. I'm going to put links in there so you guys can buy a copy of this book, because it's not only extremely helpful, but it's beautiful. I mean, the experience of experiencing the book. I mean, Andrea sent me a PDF copy of it, which was great, but I wanted to hold the physical one, so I bought one of these too. And it's really beautiful, and it's an experience in itself to experience the book. So well done. In the book, you guys talk about, you really focus on 4 R's in this, the growth code, the human growth code, right? And then each one of those has 3 human plus factors that kind of help impact that. But at the beginning, when you talk about the human growth code, you asked a friend, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Satish Kumar, is that right? I'm going to read a quote here, and maybe you can comment on that, just because you brought up fear. He said, "We fear change because we don't like what is coming in the future. We'd rather stay where we are or hide in our pasts, yet change is essential for our survival. Change is essential for human thriving, and change is essential for our well-being." So what do you have to comment on that? Because there's so much comfort or predictability in instability, and if it's not broke, don't fix it, or we need some predictability and comfort versus change and growth.
Yeah. I'll jump in because Satish is one of my mentors. He's a fabulous Indian global peace walker. So he actually worked with Mahatma Gandhi, and he walked to all the capitals in the world to try and disarm the world from nuclear weapons back in the 70s. He's today 86, and he's so vital, so active, so flourishing. And he wrote a book, or wrote several books, but his latest book is called Radical Love, which I would also advise to. So he makes actually very clear that if you ask him what's his purpose of life, he says is to love. Wonderful. And he speaks about it very eloquently. He said that I asked him what's his secret to longevity. And his answer was welcome change, which was inspirational for us and made us also want to go and look at what's the code here for growth, which allows us to continue to welcome change. So it's a long answer but I think if I would now say, with all the science and all the neuroscience that is appearing, it's become very clear that growth has many dimensions, human growth. And that's where the 12 plus factors came from, because they each, and I was thinking today, should we call them pillars? Should we call them pathways? But I think they all springboards or a surplus capacity that we all have and just don't use. So if we can just remove more of these limitations to unlock that surplus that's there already, then everyone would better thrive, or the organization will better thrive, and teams will better thrive, but also individuals.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Well, Andrea, I want to get some contribution from you because you have so much positivity to share. Could you maybe share how you and Christophe became connected and how this project began between the two of you?
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you so much for listening to the Sparks of Gratitude podcast. If you like what you're listening to, will you please hit that like, subscribe to this, and tell us what you like about it in the comments. That'll help us get great guests and keep this thing going. Now back to our interview.
Yes, of course, it was a pleasure. We actually met through a common friend who actually wrote an incredible book. His name is Amar, and his book is Purposefully. And given our shared passion for the importance of purpose, both in our personal lives and in business, we came together actually with an intention to explore ideas and opportunities together. And we met actually in the south of France, in Cannes. And that's when the beautiful conversations and journeys started. And although I live in Canada and Christophe lives in France, the distance does not stop us, if you wish, from from materializing beautiful things together. And that's really what we did. So we began exploring the possibility of writing the book. In its original form, it had a completely different energy, a very different, I would say, even reflection of our own personal stories. And it just took several iterations and conversations and actually meeting in various parts of the world, just because of our business engagements that led us to ultimately nail down the framework and then agree on an end date when we would actually publish, because we launched the book at the Be for Good Leaders conference in Amsterdam. And along the way of writing this book, I just want to point out as well, I mean, we both had specific challenges. I mean, Christophe had injured his leg and had, some issues, and he was in deep pain for many, many weeks. I had my second brain operation in between. So despite the adversities that emerged, we made it happen. And it's been an incredible journey for both of us. That was filled with joy and excitement and curiosity, and we were constantly challenging each other on how to move forward. So we are both very grateful to Amar for bringing us together.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? When I go back in my life and I look at, sometimes I'll focus on an experience or a person in my life, and then if I start to kind of count backwards at the experiences that led to that, it's pretty amazing to learn what led to this moment or what led to this relationship or connection. And sometimes there's a lot of dominoes that came before that. And that gives me such an opportunity to expand my gratitude and appreciation for even more people that have impacted my life.
Yeah.
And now you two are added to that, because there's several that led me to you. So thank you. Andrea, you brought up something of going through several challenges during the process of writing this book. Well, those challenges, I'm aware of some of them, but you mentioned, your second brain operation, right? There's a lot behind you saying that short sentence and how much that plays a role in the way your life has changed. Could you tell us a little bit about what, in part, maybe I'll preface this, a common thread that I've noticed in this podcast when I have conversations with people is people finding gratitude through grief, gratitude through the challenges and through the hard moments, and that life happens for us, but not to us. And I've heard some of your experience. Could you share your experience with your brain operations?
Yes, of course. And it's so spot on what you're saying. I know that we all have invisible scars. Yeah. So when you would look at me without actually knowing what happened in the last couple of years, when I do share the two brain adventures, as I call them, people are very, very shocked and surprised, particularly because of how I use this to reshift my focus and attention in areas that I was more drawn to. So just to highlight basically the journey I've been on, in November 2020, I underwent a 9-hour brain operation to remove a benign tumor that had been growing for over 10 years, and I had 0 symptoms. So as you can imagine, being super healthy to get such a diagnostic was quite a shock. And I just feel very blessed. And again, back to gratitude, despite the multiple meetings and conversations with neurosurgeons from all over the world that were looking at my scans, and we were deciding, okay, who do I actually trust to operate on my brain? Because you only have one chance to do this right. As soon as they open the brain, and in my case, they open the brain back here, you're literally in a total state of surrender. And I often say that the 9 most important hours of my life, I slept throughout them 100% because I surrendered 100% to the neurosurgeon and the medical team that was in the operating room. And I went in with a belief that I would wake up and continue this journey and be able to smile, because the other reality that was that the tumor was basically pressing on my facial nerve, and consequently there was a risk of facial paralysis. And even as I was in the operating room, I'm still talking with a neurosurgeon, and I was basically saying, okay, don't remove all the tumor. If there's any risk that I will not be able to smile, I need to continue smiling. So he kept laughing because this is something I had mentioned to him so many times. And as I said, he's done a brilliant job in removing 100% of the tumor, and I'm totally fine. As you can see, I can smile, which is amazing. But when you wake up from such an experience, and despite the fact that I couldn't walk and it just took, a very long time to, get back on my feet, let's just call it, you begin looking at life with such a different lens. And the things that were important before became almost irrelevant. And one of the things that I kept clinging into, particularly prior to deciding who do I share the news with, I was clinging to this image of Andrea being a superwoman and doing incredible things. And it felt as if I would share the fact that I had the brain tumor, it really showed a very vulnerable side to me, and that I was no longer that superwoman. And I wanted to cling to this image that society and the business world had labeled on me. And one of my business partners at the time helped me conquer that, if you wish, and actually go beyond that and let go of that image. And this was such a beautiful gift that he gave me, because I had so much struggle to let go of that image. But actually today, as I look at my life and I look at Andrea before the operation and Andrea after the operation, it's almost like I'm not two different people, but I have a very, very different view on life and what's important. And it has truly transformed many of the choices that I make today, personally, professionally, and as I said, it's one of the biggest gifts in my life that I'm tremendously grateful for.
Yeah, it's an incredible story, especially as I see you smile. I mean, your smile is, you can't stop looking at it. And so I appreciate your smile. It means a lot to me, someone on the outside. I can't imagine, how impactful that is to you. But this is what I feel. When I observe you smile as you tell that story, I see that you're finding joy through something that is otherwise, you could excuse somebody for complaining about it, for having, sorrow and victimhood about the situation that you were in, right? Something that was out of your control that's now affecting your life and causing you pain and risking your life potentially. Yet I'm seeing you smile and see life differently because of that. So that's inspiring to me. So thank you for sharing that. Chris, you have your psychological background, but you also you grew up in South Africa, and you also grew up with your own struggles in your life. And yeah. I'd like to hear what challenging moments you experienced, a moment or a broad spectrum of moments that have shaped who you are and how you see gratitude and joy.
Yeah. First, I would like to go back to Andrea. You became the superwoman.
Isn't that true?
To me, by letting go on that false idea of what it should be. So for me, you are still a superwoman. Let's be clear.
You're so kind, Christophe. Thank you.
So struggles. I mean, life. I mean, one of the struggles, probably one of the first one, is losing my mother and my parents quite early in life, and having to learn to live in an environment, in other family context, where you are a welcome stranger. No matter how kind and how good intentions those people have, you know that you are an outsider, and you need to empathize not only with the person who took you in, and in my case, it was once a Christian family, and afterwards someone who was a drug addict who brought me into their home. Her name was Sila, most fantastic, fabulous, creative artist, and brought me into a very, I would say, conservative family. Now, in both cases, this learning to empathize with more people has led me to also empathize with people I would actually not know, and that was the garden boy. And the kids of black people, and this was in apartheid time. So the way we mingled was quite separated. So I mean, if I just think of the people that actually helped me later try and change South Africa, try and create a multiracial student community, it's due to these experiences where you come into a family and you are as vulnerable as the staff. And being vulnerability, and now today I know it's called a vulnerability loop, you learn to trust people much more of other color. And you build friendships which have lasted through time, but then you also become more open in your mind in how to see everyone as a human being and not as a label. So what I'm trying to say is, with that struggle of losing family quite early and being invited into a family where you are a stranger, makes you vulnerable and helps you see the world in a way that you can trust people you would normally not immediately befriend. And that happened to me. And it's only much later when I said, why do I get myself into trouble trying to change a system that favored me? Let's be honest, I had all the benefit of the system. And then I say, it's because of these moments where you were empathizing, because you also share their vulnerability of, will I fit in here? Will I be accepted? Am I doing the right thing? So you're over sensitive. Now that's one struggle, but it had broadened my mind and just has made me more courageous to step up against a system that served me. And that was obviously the apartheid system. So that got me also into trouble. But then I realized that even the oppressors in this case, let's call it that way, they also human, and they have a chip on their shoulder. And in that way, my biggest inspiration to learn about humanizing and shifting minds and welcoming change was Nelson Mandela, who gave everyone a new story to look at ourselves. And this morning, I was speaking about identity to a group of business leaders. And I told them how when I first visited France, South Africa was still the country of apartheid. And no matter where I went, and I was playing rugby all over the place, no matter where I went, I was a white South African, so I was bad. Even if I got into trouble and stood up, de facto, I was bad. And 3 years later, when President Nelson Mandela gave South Africans a new way to look at ourselves and to relate to each other, which is the rainbow nation at peace with itself and the rest of the world, going through nearly the same route in France and in Europe, all of a sudden I became a good guy. I was welcomed, I was kind, but I was still the same person. But the story in which I fitted and they could relate to me changed. Maybe for me that was such an eye-opener. It was such a, wow, just finding the right frame of reference by which people can relate to you and giving them a better story in which to fit, made them kinder, made them more generous, made me feel better about myself.
It's an amazing story. I hear you echo some of the same things that Andrea said with, as you experienced empathy, there was this sense of, being a welcome stranger, and that involved us a bit of surrender as well, to be able to trust someone else, as Andrea had to surrender all of her previous beliefs and even potentially her life to go under and have brain surgery, and be able to have that trust and surrender. And so that significance of surrendering without fear or transcending that, I'm hearing that from both of you right now. I think it's great. Well, so part of that is and you can explain it better, is when I read your book, a lot of that is maybe surrendering or letting go of a different paradigm and shifting that paradigm to be able to believe that we can prosper in change rather than stay with the way things are. And change is coming whether we join in or not. I mean, a theme that I noticed in the book is that you express that, but with hope, that how we can be part of that rather than fearful of it. And so as you go through these 4 R's and what is the code of this framework, and you have beautiful, imagery and models kind of explaining this, but your 4 R's are, well, and maybe Andrea, maybe I'll let you explain, what are the 4 R's that are in the Human Growth Code in your book?
Sure. The 4 R's comprise resourcefulness, relevance, resilience, and relationships. And as you've pointed out earlier, each one of these 4 dimensions has 3 key pillars or human drivers that allow us to have this model that really is connected to the Human Growth Code and talks about all the possibilities and the untapped opportunities on how we can actually elevate human potentiality and also business at the same time.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing those. And you wouldn't be surprised to know that there is one of these that I was particularly interested in, which is the resilience R of all of these, because one of the plus factors, the human plus factors under resilience, is gratitude and how that makes such a difference. And so I'd love to hear how that plays a difference. First, I loved reading through your work, talking about how to magnify resilience and what that includes. Gratitude is one of the 3, but it also includes flow, which I really love the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and Stephen Kotler. As soon as I read this, I thought, I'm like, oh, I wonder if they've read all that work. And of course you have. But you refer to longevity, flow, and gratitude. And Andrea, aside from this book, that's one of the pillars of your 3 pillars of joy is gratitude. And so now this is a very big question, Andrea, but why is gratitude so important to you? What could you share with us of the importance and significance of gratitude?
Gratitude is, in my view, one of the key pillars that is connected to joy. And gratitude, I just want to highlight, and I'd actually shared this in my TEDx talk, that we can look at a multitude of dimensions or layers of gratitude. How can we look at a situation, for example, that we may be experiencing that may be challenging or not, right? So whatever the situation is, are we able to have gratitude for ourselves, how we have showed up and how we actually navigated the circumstance? Then can we have gratitude towards others for the contributions in a multitude of ways, either supporting us, challenging us, and so on? And then how can we have the final layer of gratitude towards life, right? Because often when we were talking earlier about change, the reality is that if life is bringing us specific circumstances that may appear challenging at first, if we're able to embrace this with curiosity and excitement, we can actually then have more gratitude towards life and for these beautiful moments and synchronicities that emerge in our lives and that often lead to incredible opportunities. And ultimately, that's really how I look at gratitude, is through this multi-layer approach. And as I said, it's something that we need to live and breathe through every single day. In fact, just as a side note, this is something that I've been instilling in our children since we were very, very young. And when we would be coming together for a meal, I would ask them, what are you grateful for? And I really, really wanted them to understand the power of gratitude, that maybe you had a very tough day or maybe a very painful day for whatever reason, but there's always a spark of sunshine in the darkness. But we just must never lose the opportunity to actually pay attention to it. So that's what gratitude is for me.
Chris, what do you see as the importance of gratitude and how that might be connected to a lot of the work that you've done with empathy?
Well, so much. I actually worked for 1 year, and I don't know if I've ever told this to Andrea, but I actually worked 1 year focusing on how generosity pays. I actually had a program called Generosity Pays. So for me, gratitude and generosity are quite closely linked. So gratitude obviously is a humbling capacity. You learn to become more appreciative when you have gratitude. So I think as a psychologist, practicing gratitude allows you to become more compassionate, more thankful towards others. And when you give that to others, they give it back to you. So I have, even in all my misfortunes or challenges or whatever you faced, I mean, a beautiful, Andrea was part of it. I got married last week. Yes, with Sandrine, and we 22 years together, but we turned it into a wonderful moment of now celebrating our bondage. And the gratitude that I received from the people coming, and they came from 17 countries. And I mean, some like Andrea came all the way from Canada to France to do this, and people came from all the way from South Africa to do that, and from Greece, and from different places. And Sandrine says she felt bad because she's an enormously generous person, but she says, I don't deserve this, was her first, and I said, look, all these people come here because they have joy being part of this moment. And yes, you deserve that. So there's this idea that, and I think that's how I connect to what Andrea was saying, we often feel undeserving of gratitude. And it's in our own mind, because we that feeling undeserving is downplaying yourself. No, we all should learn to be generous with each other and be grateful towards one another, not because it's an obligation, because it's such a source of joy, such a abundance creator. And that's exactly how I felt, but I think, and Andrea, you can add to it, how everyone felt at this wedding. It was just a abundance, generous moment where people were sharing the joy of this special moment for us, but between themselves. So for me, gratitude is a real catalyst for creating surpluses in our lives. And it's, if you talk economical terms, it's the hidden capital that most, let's call it carrot and stick economies, don't see.
Interesting. I love that. The hidden capital that we can all tap. I've said sometimes that gratitude is free, but it's also freeing.
Yeah.
That it can liberate us from resentment and victim mindset and scarcity. And it liberates us to expand into generosity and joy and hope. And we have that within us. It's that hidden capital.
Yeah.
So do you have any tips or methods? How does somebody find that? How do they crack that open?
I many, but I think we spoke about Satish earlier, and he calls it radical love for self, others, and nature. And it's a word that people feel very easily uncomfortable with. But when you learn not to be uncomfortable with it, it's so liberating. It's easier to hate than to love. And maybe the Beatles or John Lennon got it right. All you need is love. And it's maybe a bit tacky, but if you really take it to the core, if you are able to love, generosity is easy.
Yeah, I believe you. It's more than a platitude, but it really is at the core of what matters most.
And to build on what Christophe said, and connecting to the fear factor that we spoke about earlier, at the level of the brain, what's really, really interesting is that if you're feeling a state of anxiety or fear, if you're able now to shift your attention towards something that you are grateful for, our minds do not have the capacity to have a negative thought and a positive thought at the same time. So that is also a way that is very, very simple and that we can all tap into at any moment in the day to actually shift from a fear-driven and heightened anxiety to one where we're experiencing love, we're experiencing gratitude, and we're able to potentially shift our perspectives on situations that may seem challenging at first and awaken us to the possibility that this could be just another gift in life that is steering us in the right direction to become a better version of ourselves.
Yes, I love that. I believe that it's the fastest way to shift into that mindset is to focus on gratitude. Because if we see, and if we train ourselves to see those things, or if we pause and allow ourselves to see that, then we feel it, and then it moves us even in the darkest moments, to be able to find that. Viktor Frankl tells the story of finding gratitude for the flower he sees in the prison yard in Auschwitz. And he finds gratitude in a moment like that. I can surely find gratitude in my life. And that I can't control my external circumstances sometimes, but I can control what's here and here. And so you talk about in your book about bringing gratitude within your team. I mean, I believe that this all starts, individual. I need to do this for myself, and then, and then I can work outward. But if I can help doing that with my team, let's see, you quote William James that said, the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. I mean, isn't that the truth? I love it when I feel appreciated. And in order to do that, you start by saying to practice humility and gratitude and acknowledge the truth, you need others to progress in this world. Self-sufficiency is a myth. From the day we're born, our existence relies on others. And so that brings up this concept of and I think you two, when you had a conversation on Andrea's podcast together, had this conversation of the interplay between me and we, right? And there's this back and forth. I'd love to hear your comments on that, where self-sufficiency is a myth. What does that mean to you? And how does that apply to this, our reliance on others and that balancing act? Maybe Chris, you can give your thoughts on that.
Yeah, or we speak about it also in the context of autonomy. Especially when we think of autonomy, we confuse it with being independent, and we confuse autonomy with being free and self-reliant. And that's it doesn't only make gratitude weak, it makes autonomy weak. So to have the full benefit of autonomy, meaning that you can be self-directed, but doesn't mean you have to be alone in doing so. Others too, considering. I would say the illusion of anyone that they are self-reliant is only the illusion until you face something that really makes you vulnerable. Anyone who's been really vulnerable in his life and exposed will tell you that is an absolute illusion. I mean, Andrea spoke about 9 hours of her life being spent sleeping. It's just a way to show how reliant she was and is every day on others. It's good to recognize that, because we do live with a cultural myth of we must be stronger by ourselves. We don't need anyone. You're not a real man if you're reliant on others type of hero talk. And so once you step beyond that and go back to Satish, what he says, if you can love yourself, others, and nature in everything you do, you will be welcoming change will become easy when you do that. So it doesn't mean you have to lose yourself also. Gratitude can also be a process of self-denial. And in certain religions or in Christianity, sometimes you go too far in that. Gratitude is still an active, chosen act, something you choose to do and something that you choose to practice. And when you do that mindfully, it does empower. But I know, and I'm going back to the situation that I was as a person who was a welcome stranger or a young man or young child in other homes, you can easily become so grateful in obligation so that it becomes more a rule or a submission than a source of liberation. So when gratitude becomes I'm not worth it, speaking of Sandrine, I don't deserve this, and it becomes a source of debt or due, then I think that's not the gratitude that both Andrea and myself will advocate. Gratitude is really appreciating others without debt, but more with a genuine feeling of thankfulness. So maybe I'm not saying the words exactly, but when it gets into obligation and debt, and it actually becomes a negative emotion. It becomes one of denying yourself in the process, and that's not a growth strategy.
I've heard people say it and simplifying a similar concept all the way down. But when I was taught gratitude as a child, it was first as an obligation of say please and thank you. say yes sir and yes ma'am and so on. I'm taught to say that as an obligatory behavior, but then later to learn that no, gratitude stems from choice and love within me, and then it's a mindset, it's a feeling, it's a lifestyle. That's a different sense of gratitude.
Yeah, and I'll add, because I've been a lot busy with purpose and impact, and it's choosing also not to be an asshole.
No.
Being more provocative in that.
Yeah.
Don't be an ass. It's easy to be an ass, but just don't be an ass. And I got that. In the book I speak of it, or I think I spoke of it. But one of the best coaches in the world, basketball, Popovich, he was asked why does he give so much to charity, and he says we've got all way too much money, and you're an ass if you keep it. And I thought, wow, that's a great way. He's just showing you're an ass if you're not generous, because you've got more than enough.
Yeah, and generosity. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like so many things stem from gratitude, and it's just they're all so interrelated with love and generosity and empathy that it's all part of the same body. Well, the two of you are so gracious to share your time with me. I want to talk to you forever. But I want to remind everybody that this book is so impactful and helpful. So look up the Human Growth Code. We'll show you how to get it and how to watch Andrea's podcast and take her survey. I encourage everybody to. Andrea, could you tell people a little bit about your mission with 1 million years of joy and how they can take part in that?
Yes. So 1 million years of joy and a little bit of history actually behind it emerged after my first brain operation, because I was really at a point where I kept asking myself, why did I survive such a grueling operation while some people did not? And evidently it makes you rethink purpose and want to have a deeper and more meaningful impact in this world. And I had this deep inspiration to create 1 million years of joy, which currently comprises three main things. It's a podcast, as you mentioned, whereby we share stories of individuals to inspire others to live more joyfully. We also have the global survey on joy, where we're analyzing joy across cultures, across generation. What are the obstacles to joy? What are the biggest sources of joy? And the third dimension is a documentary on joy, whereby we want to combine the insights from the surveys and the interviews we're conducting to actually share more of the specific insights that have emerged since we started this, in order to also bring an educational component that hopefully will transform our lives and how we tap into more joy into our personal and also professional lives.
Thank you for explaining that. And how everybody can participate in this is you can participate in that survey on Andrea's website. Look at the link below. I will include that here. I have filled that out. I've gone through the survey. It only takes a few minutes, but that's going to help Andrea collect this information that she needs to do this research, to do this good. And so you can participate in this joy. And I think focusing on joy also is going to help us all amplify that. Well, I have so much joy for sharing this time with both of you, and for you sharing your wisdom and decades of research and curiosity and in preparing this book, among others that you've written. Both of you, thank you so much for joining this conversation on Sparks of Gratitude podcast. And I hope I can send a lot of people your way because you're doing so much good work.
Thank you so much, Randy. It's been an amazing.
Yep, Andreea, Christophe, thank you so much for joining us. And everybody, you could have listened to anything today and you decided to listen to this. We love you. Thank you.